$10, $60 copay. However, for the first $2,600, there's no copay, there's no out-of-pocket, there's no nothing. Some of the plans that some retirees have an expense, an out-of-pocket expense for an emergency room visit, or say a copay of $10 to go visit the doctor. Well, for the first $2,600 worth of expenses, including doctor visits, there's no copay. After the $2,600 is met, there's also no copay. So there are portions of the plan that you can literally point to that are better, but the potential, including prescription coverage, but the potential exists for someone who utilizes a lot of prescriptions. There are copays that could become greater, which goes to an important point that I would like to say as one board member, and I know it was discussed when we met in the workshop, and that is that as we institute this plan, we've had the workshop, we've asked the questions, and again, as I stated earlier, the questions that board members were asking were structured around how would I feel if I received this. There were more questions asked about the coverage than there were about the savings. But truly, neither retirees nor this board can know fully if there's a gap that affects a certain group of retirees that retired in 1999 to 2003, and the contract was in place, provided this benefit, and this benefit isn't being provided. So I can't say today that I can guarantee 100% when that day comes that we're not going to discover something. I can say 100% today that I'm not aware of a method by which our current retirees are going to be hurt or damaged by this plan. I can say for sure this is probably not likely the last change. Whether it's this board or a future board, I believe the healthcare industry is going to continue to evolve, and we'll have to look at plans. The way that Blue Cross is, in essence, forcing us to look at this change is by raising the premiums rapidly and exponentially on some of these existing plans, whereby the HSA plan, they're actually lowering our renewal rate by 4.5% this year. So they're making winners and losers. They're basically forcing us to make some of these changes. This probably isn't the last change. But I, for one, want to do this properly so that in the event a change does come a year or 5 years from now, if I happen to be sitting in this chair, I'd still have the same trust based on doing it right this time. The question was asked about whether or not we're saying fully funded versus $2,600. So the motion is fully funded deductibles, and Mr. Kinney will receive 50% of the HSA contribution, in essence, that deductible. So the answer to that question is I'm not using $1,300 or $2,600 in the motion. Now, obviously, a future board can vote to say whatever they'd like, but the motion that we're proposing is fully funded, or 50%, and it's what we have in the contract. When the IRS raised the limit from $2,500 to $2,600, we split that, so it went from $1,250 to $1,300 because we said a 50% in the contract. There was a question about are we going to fund the OPEB contributions from the savings? While I respect that, I'm not going to make that as a motion because at this point I can't make that. We're not making this decision to fund the OPEB account. Prior boards, many prior boards, did not fund the OPEB account. Probably a board prior to us, the one that you served on.
2004 we started.
Yeah, I was going to say 5, but
It could have been.
2005, the township began to fund the OPEB account. And over the last several years, we've continued to fund the general fund OPEB account, even though it put us in a deficit. In essence, we've transferred money from the general fund, basically our savings, into the OPEB account, because if nothing else, we're not earning a dime on $160,000, but when we invest it into an account where it's managed, we are able to invest that money and realize a rate of return. We have not been able to invest in the firefighters' OPEB account because simply, even with these savings, we're still at a deficit. And although that's a subject for another topic and another discussion at another time, the reality is I can't sit here and say, well, we're going to save money, but we have a deficit in the fire fund. Before I can start to invest in that OPEB account, we've got to address the deficit in the fire account. So I'm not going to ask the board to make a commitment, but clearly we can't fund the OPEB account currently in the fire budget, even with these savings. So I don't know if there's other comment from other board members or. Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. Brado, a support by Mr. Batanti to move all pre-65 retirees to the Blue Cross Blue Shield Simply Blue PPO HSA with fully funded deductibles into their HSA. And to move all post-65 retirees to Blue Cross Blue Shield Medicare Advantage Option 5 with all current prescriptions included. Mr. Kinney will receive 50% of his HSA contribution. Current and future pre-65 retirees, current and future pre-65 retirees currently receiving or eligible for the HSA plan are not affected, and any retiree with a 25, 50, or 75% premium contribution will continue to be liable for that contribution. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. The next step, and I talked to Mr. Vogelai today, is to begin the education process. Cambridge will be responsible primarily for educating pre-65. Blue Cross has a team of people that regularly do this education for post-65 retirees, so they'll probably take a greater lead on that education. And they've assured me that they can have that education done well prior to January 1. Next on the agenda is introduction of a new zoning ordinance. Board members, the Planning Commission requests that the Board of Trustees adopts the new zoning ordinance. One error needs to be corrected. Article 5, accessory structures and uses, C, setbacks and placement, number 4, no accessory building shall be located closer than 4 feet to any side or rear lot line. In Article 14, zoning districts in each of the single-family residential charts under accessory structure, it states that the side setback is 5 feet. The correct measurement is 4 feet. Further, an amendment to Article 9, Section 11.19, regarding medical marijuana in certain zoning districts is attached and needs to be adopted as a part of the new zoning ordinance. And primarily, on the second page attached to the agenda item, is that the home occupation is being struck, and instead, we're identifying the IND or industrial zone as the appropriate place where marijuana would be allowed to grow.
Isn't it crazy that we're even saying this?
Yep. But this is in essence what this has evolved to, and as we discussed, we cannot legislate away the caregiver option in the Medical Marijuana Act. But what we can do is decide where it can be done. And as we discussed, in the past, and when the act was first passed by the voters of Michigan, it seemed like the best thing to do was that this was something that someone was going to do in a spare bedroom. What we've seen is that folks have gradually, for lack of a better word, industrialized this manufacture or
homes.
growth.
Yeah.
Right, and they're destroying
That's
homes.
not what it was intended.
It was
No.
by no means what it
You
was
know-
intended, but an interpretation of the law has allowed for it.
Yeah.
So,
What happened?
so since we have to allow it somewhere, the question is, do we want it next door to your house? Or do we want to say that it needs to be in the industrial zone? And as we discussed, although we might sit here and say we'd like to say it shouldn't happen anywhere, since we have to do it somewhere, the industrial zone seems to be much more palatable to a majority of the residents of our township.
A great analogy was, you didn't want somebody stamping parts in your neighborhood, so why would you want somebody growing marijuana in your neighborhood? It should be
Absolutely.
in a
And-
business district.
Right, and I want to point out, primarily what we're doing is adopting the new zoning ordinance. But since this addresses it, and we've received requests to change how and where it can be grown, it doesn't cost us anything additional to incorporate this now. However, per the attorney's advice, this is likely to have to change sometime in the future based on actions that the state legislature is taking now. But if they're any bit as successful as they are on road funding, we might as well get this done now, instead of trying to explain to somebody why your neighbor is allowed to grow a whole bunch of marijuana next to your home and what deterrent that is to your property value.
Well, that was gonna be my question, Mr. Supervisor, is that any of the new legislation going to lead us to want to change this or have, the ability to change it, to more, adequately address the matter? I mean, are there things that are coming up in the legislation that we may want to include? And Mr. Booth, I don't think we
Yeah,
have
if
to
you look
answer
at
that now, but.
if you look at the legislation that they currently moved through the House, the best thing that's in there right now is the way it's structured is the local municipality has the ultimate say as to whether those activities can take place in the community. Now,
Can-
whether that makes it through, is a whole nother story, and how
And
it
there's
gets
also taxation.
and it got to a point last year where it went through the House and just went nowhere in the Senate. So it could happen again, but we always can address it once the law comes
That was
out.
gonna be
Yeah,
my
so
question.
why do a ordinance right now? We know that that's coming in.
Yeah, but we don't know that's coming in.
Yeah, it's gonna pass, you know.
It didn't happen last
Just
time.
like the roads. Here's the whole point. For the next
change
1 month or for the next 3 years, this could continue to be the law of the land. So during that time, do you want me to tell anyone who wants to do this that they need to do it next to your home or in the industrial zone? That's the
Well,
question.
I'd just like to talk about it, is what I'd like to do for
Okay.
2 minutes, and I haven't talked the whole meeting. So I'd just like to say a couple comments about this.
Sounds good.
This doesn't, I don't know what the interpretation of this law is that people are talking about. But do you know what that interpretation is, Rob? It looks like we're moving into this grow house operation, and I don't believe that that's what it was intended for.
It does, I agree, that's not what it's intended for, but we just got retained on that lawsuit in city of Warren, and it's tough on municipalities when you're the target of this, because, they're certifying a class action there, 23 plaintiffs suing the city of Warren. And I think as far as we're concerned here, to say that it's this type of activity, although we don't think it's permitted, should be permitted, we're allowing in a certain part, our industrial area, I think is a reasonable way to kind of go forward for the next year anyway, because it sounds like even by November of next year, the voters are gonna have some initiatives to look at too, and that could really change the landscape, but I think this is reasonable.
Well, looking at this, right, so I've read about the Warren case, right? That has a bunch of quirks to it, but
Yeah,
I don't know, how you have a lawyer's office, all of a sudden being a grow operation, that's for another day. But in this case, we're not limiting a grow operation here. So we're just saying put it in the industrial park. So if 50 caregivers get together and buy a 100,000 square foot building and they start all growing in there, would that be allowed under our ordinance?
They're
That's-
already doing it, just so that you know, and we're struggling with enforcement, so that's a big part of it.
I don't know how you struggle with enforcement, but, and that's not,
yeah.
marijuana is still illegal, right? So if you have this big grow operation, that's for law enforcement to decide what's going on there or not is legal, right? So there's a fine line between somebody having 4 or 5 plants at their home and, Ken is the medical marijuana user, so Darren's providing him the medical marijuana. Or Darren's now have this big grow operation and, six people are now growing at Darren's house and providing,
But that,
you know.
the issue is, and when we discussed it at the workshop, is it's occurring already, because the way the courts have interpreted the cases allows people to grow 90-something plants, and they all team up and say, you know what, I got a house over here on North Point Circle, and I'm gonna just.
That did happen, by the way. down
Correct,
the
I
street.
that's
get
the
it.
whole point, and we have no control over it. So the whole point is that since a majority of our township is residential, and I'm gonna have a hard time looking anybody in the face.
Well, I guess what
when-
I'm asking is,
Hang on, hold on,
can we put
let me
caps
finish.
on it? I
Hold
get
on.
it, I don't need to,
I have to allow it somewhere. So
you
we-
don't have to allow it anywhere, but,
Well, on that, you and I disagree, okay? So under the legal advice that we receive, we have to allow it somewhere. So the question is, where do we allow it? That's the real question.
we can
that's
put
the
it on
bottom line.
North Plum Street.
So my opinion is, it shouldn't be in a residential zone. I'm not aware of any non-grower that wants it next to their home. It's occurring in industrial zone. It's been occurring in industrial zones throughout our area, not necessarily our township, for many years now. It's the way it's being done, and the courts are not preventing it. It needs to be addressed at the legislative level, but in the meantime, the question for me is real simple. When someone comes in to say, you need to go shut this down because it's occurring in my home, and I say, well, I can tell you why it's occurring next to your home, because here is our ordinance that says that's what they're supposed to do. I'm not comfortable saying that to that resident. I'm much more comfortable saying, you need to do it at some other location, no different, as Mr. Brado said, than stamping or some other activity.
All right, whatever.
And I know we sort of got off topic on, not off topic, but deeper into one specific section of the zoning ordinance, and we sat through and went through it with the planning commission, and they've done a super thorough job, and one of the questions that I had that I'd like to share the answer to was, I say I live in a R1B right now. Is next time when I try and expand my house, is that gonna change because of this? Am I now, out of zoning, out of compliance? And they said, no, your home is still gonna have the same setbacks, the same lot size requirements, so nobody's gonna run into that issue, and that's always a concern, is you put people out of compliance with their zoning ordinance just because you're trying to update it, so. But again, thank you to the planning commission who spent years on it.
Years.
Yeah, almost 3 years.
Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
I'll go ahead and make the motion to introduce the new zoning ordinance with the 2 noted corrections and to publish a notice of introduction at the Charter Township of Harrison, and that the full text may be reviewed in the clerk's office during business hours, 8 AM to 4:30 PM, Monday through Friday.
And just before, we had spoken with Mr. Huth's office earlier today, and they said that they were introducing a ordinance that is repealing the entirety of ordinance 306, which is our current zoning ordinance, and replacing it with ordinance number, the proposed ordinance 307 entitled zoning ordinance. So I'd offer that as
I will make that amendment as part of my
But the rest of it
motion.
is as far as,
And I
Is
got
there
that,
support?
and I don't have it in
I'll
front of me.
support.
Okay. All right, we discussed it for a fair amount. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Tominelli?
Yes.
Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado?
Yes.
Mr. Capro?
Yes.
Mr. York?
No,
Mr. Verkest?
Yes. Thank you, Board. Last is the emergency addendum, which we called item G3 from the Assessor's Office. Board members, Mariners Point filed a tax appeal for years 2014 and 2015. The hearing date is scheduled for January 4th. Pre-hearing statements and valuation disclosures are due November 5th of this year, 2015. A persuasive valuation disclosure from the township is an appraisal performed by a private fee appraiser who specializes in shopping centers. Our assessor contacted several appraisers, and one, Mr. Ken Siegel, has the shopping center specialty as an appraiser, as well as the willingness to testify, which may be possible if this case moves forward. Mrs. Ryan indicated that several appraisers are willing to do an appraisal but not appear before the Michigan Tax Tribunal. Mr. Siegel's fee for the appraisal is $3,200 for year 2014, plus an additional $1,000 for year 2015. His fee to testify is $150 to $200 per hour. In the past, our assessor has been able to successfully settle most large tax appeals, which minimizes our costs, but unfortunately in this instance, she does not believe the settlement is in the best interest of the township. She did give me some statistics regarding this property in the event that there were further questions, but she feels confident that this is one where we need to appeal. And clearly, when you consider the number of properties in the township, certainly not discarding homes, but when you consider marinas and other commercial properties, the vast majority of those she's been able to settle without coming to us asking for a professional appraisal. So I feel like her track record is pretty good. So if she's gone through those and she's come to one and said, look, these are just simply unrealistic figures, from what I know about this property, I believe we are taking the right action by going for a tax appeal.
make a motion to contract Mr. Ken Siegel to perform an appraisal for Mariners Point Shopping Center for tax years 2014 and 15 for MTT number 14-003396.
And can I just add a cost of $4,200?
At a cost of $4,200. I was thinking leaving it more open because you have this extra cost.
Well, the cost to testify may not be necessary,
All right.
but that, I mean, a couple $100 was
That's
within
why I
our right
just
to
sort of,
spend it.
that's
Yeah.
why I
would
sort of
say
left it
the
open.
$4,200 plus additional testifying costs.
Yeah.
Okay.
so
Is that a second? Was that a friendly amendment? Are you good
Yeah,
with
that's
that?
fine. I was just sort of leaving it open that we
Sure.
understand what the costs were.
No problem, okay. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Now is public comments. We'll accept public comments of 5 minutes in length, and it can be about any subject that you wish.
My name is Mike Gutel. This is also for a message, more importantly, I would guess to say to the citizens in Harrison Township, I want to direct to you as well as the board. I started a nonprofit organization called Save Lake St. Clair. I'm asking you to please go to the website, www.savelakestclair.org. If you're on Facebook, to also please go to our Facebook page, like it, and share it. I'm asking you to please join in our efforts and get behind the cause. We need to end this pollution that's been happening for decades in the Lake St. Clair. I don't have too much time to talk about everything about it, but most importantly, it's not just the pollution that's coming into the lake that's making it not pretty, doesn't look good, it smells, it's deteriorating our property values, your taxes you collect on, those houses that live along the water, businesses that you want to thrive on it. We always want to promote what the area is about. You guys have an asset here that we need to protect. If you go to our website, click on the facts page, every single thing that we have on there that's a fact, we have a copied link to either a county website or anything else that is factual. There's links to it, you can go to verify it. I'm asking you to also please go to our YouTube page. Take a look at the videos we produced and put together. Lake St. Clair is a beautiful lake. It's the best lake in the world. It has the best damn fishing you can possibly get in anywhere. It has the best parties. It has the best sunrises. It has the best spots that we all want to promote and protect. But it just hasn't been getting the protection it's needed. This year alone, I'll just go back to this last storm alone. The last storm alone, we dumped in over 38, or close to 38 million gallons of sewage and other toxins into the lake. What does that equate to? The average tanker truck that holds gas, to give you a perspective on this now, when you see a tanker truck driving with gas, it holds roughly 9,000 gallons. Imagine just in this last rain alone, we had to dump over 4,000 tanker trucks in a row lined up full of sewage and toxins right into the lake. The sad thing is, now imagine 90,000 tanker trucks lined up in a row. That's what we did this year. We're close to 1 billion gallons of sewage. What's even worse, last year alone, not just Macomb County, but Oakland County as well, had dumped over 10 billion gallons, billion with a B, last year alone, into our lake. It's not just the sewage that's the issue. You line up 10 people in a row, 8 of these 10 people are going to be on some kind of pharmaceutical drug, narcotic drug, whatever it may be. The drugs that we intake as humans, the pharmaceuticalness of it, we ingest it into our bodies. It doesn't magically disappear. When we have to go to the bathroom, we urinate that out into the toilet. We flush that down. Those pharmaceuticals remain in the waters. When we dump these massive dumps into the lake, we are also dumping all the pharmaceuticalness into the waters, including that stuff that, goes along with it. Our beaches have been closed, and it's not because of geese, it's not because of the birds, it is because of every time after it rains, you can, for the last 20 years, go onto the website. If you want to look up the data, it's all there. Every time it rains, 2 to 3 days later, our beaches are closed. If it was our beaches were closed because of the birds, because of anything else, they would be closed year-round. Not 20 years worth of data to prove, here comes the rain, it's closed. Fact, Metro Beach was closed this year for 30 days straight. Fact, Memorial Park was closed more than Metro Beach. Your taxes and property values are going down. Why are the canals filling in when statistically on record, the lake is at its highest level it's been in the last 20 years? Most importantly is the drinking water aspect that everybody needs to understand. We all drink the water out of Lake St. Clair. In fact, roughly 40% of the population in the state of Michigan gets its drinking water from Lake St. Clair. What are we doing? We are drinking everybody else's pharmaceuticals. We can't filter all that out. This should not be the burden of Harrison Township alone. This should not be the burden of St. Clair Shores. This should not be the burden of Grosse Pointe. This should not be the burden of any city that surrounds just the lake. Because we have all the cities above us that are also causing the problem, also need to pay to address the problem. I saw a meeting last couple weeks ago. I believe one of your council members even stated, you guys all know what's going on. It's been there. I actually want to right now take a moment to highlight Doug Martz. This guy lives in Harrison Township. He has been fighting this fight for over 25 years. It has been an amazing amount what he's been able to do. But the timing is now that we just need to band together, make an effort, and make this stop. This is not Harrison Township's problem. This is everybody's problem. It's not just the cities that share the shoreline. The people inland drink the water that come out of Lake St. Clair. I heard a council member up here suggest possibly fining. How's it going to stop? Suggest fining them $100,000 every time that they have to dump. That's a great start. Let's put it to work. Our own state rep, Anthony Ferlini, even suggested in the news press that the polluters need to pay. We all know what's going on. We can't continue to turn our back to say, okay, we dumped in a lake, got through another one, because your shoreline is getting killed. Your taxes are going down. You want to promote what's going on. You want to protect the lake. Simply put, I know my time's up, and I'm sorry, I can talk about this for 3 hours. We just can't wait another 20 years to go by. Doug Martz started this effort back in 1994, I believe. He's got plenty of articles that you can read about in the news. We've all known about this. We just simply can't wait another 20 years. Imagine what the shoreline's going to look like. Imagine what's going to happen. I'm asking you guys, people out there, to just band together behind this movement. The City of St. Clair Shores Council, along with the mayor of St. Clair Shores, that's what I passed out to you guys as a picture. I spoke at the meeting with them. It was a powerful movement. They have the whole entire city, including the mayor, acknowledge what is going on. They were willing to finally acknowledge, stand behind our sign that said, Save Lake St. Clair. Because they know this is an issue that's not going to go away. We just need to band together. I'm asking you guys to talk to St. Clair Shores, talk to Harrison Township, or talk to Anchor Bay, talk to Grosse Pointe, band together with everybody. Even the cities inland, we need work. It's a lot of work that's gonna take. We're basically an ant looking at Mount Everest. But guess what? It all starts at one step. Take that step. And I guess the end, I just want to quote the Lorax. If nobody cares an awful lot, it's not going to get better. It's not. I'm asking you guys to care, stand behind our cause, because working together is the only way that we will actually save Lake St. Clair. At the end of the meeting, I will be here. If you guys would like, stand behind the sign with me. I would appreciate that. And I guess keep the movement going, because it takes everybody to get behind us. There's not one particular person to point the finger at what's going on. We just need to work together to stop this. We can't wait 20 more years. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Board. Back up again. Just a couple more quick ones here. You guys mentioned after you guys had your comments there, the educational end of the insurance. Do you have a timetable for that yet, Ken? Any idea when you're gonna be doing that?
I'll answer that.
Okay. And could you notify us of both of them? Because again, I'm in the pre-65 now, but in the blink of an eye, you know, I mean, I'll be in that post-65 group. So I would,
20 years.
I would like to come in, well, it's not that far off, Darren.
No, it's a valid
Hey,
point.
just because I have all of it up here makes me look a little bit younger, but, you know, this was all white earlier today. I shaved just to come and see you guys. So, yeah, I would like to know both dates, and if you could, is it the plan to have them close together? Because I know some of our retirees are out of state, and they go down south in the wintertime, down to Florida, and, you know, if they have to come back for something, I live out of state right now. You know, if I have to come back, I just soon only have to come back once and stay a couple of days versus, you know, come back 2 times, make that drive round trip. And like I said, a lot of them are probably gonna be getting ready to go to Florida this time. And then, currently the one that we have, the HRA, I've lived in 2 different states since I left, and that insurance has covered me. It's part of the Blues plan. It's covered me everywhere. Is that gonna be the same with this plan, without a state coverage? Or is there any diminishing to that? I'm assuming there's not, but I'd like to get an answer on that. And, you know, one of the big things that I see in there that is a difference, it's a depreciation of the benefits, is the copay on the prescription. Is there any plan to look at that? Because I know the intent is equal or better, and when you look at that, you know, we pay out of pocket now, but then our copay gets reduced, where now we're gonna be using that 2,600. And I did take the opportunity to talk to a couple of the current guys, and that was one of the concerns that they really had, because there's a couple of them, I don't wanna mention any names because there's medical issues there, but, you know, they have part of their family, and they're racking up some pretty decent prescriptions with different things going on with their children and their wife. So they burn through that 2,600, and then that copay is totally on them, where under the current plan that we're in right now, generics would get reimbursed back to 0, and in preferred brands, if that's all you could get, would get reimbursed to $10. And now it's gonna be 10 and 60 out of pocket once that 2,600's done. So, and again, there's other things. There's 30 days less in the skilled nursing care, and I mean, let's face it, it's retiree health care. That's one of the benefits. Of course, they, were very kind to give us prenatal and postnatal improvements in our retired years, which doesn't make any sense to me, but
Well,
maybe
it's not,
for some
it's not
people.
in the Medicare Advantage plan, I can tell you that.
So, that would be one of the things, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but when I look under here, I see that we've got the deductibles are gonna be fully funded, and then we do have a copay dollar maximum, where under the current plan, those were fully reimbursed too, for the plan that I have, and now when I look over here, it says 950, and that's the difference between, you know, how much, I think Darren said something about, I'll call it a deductible, call it, yeah, I learned that lesson once a few years back. So, the copay, now there is no co-insurance, but I do see an annual copay, the
There's a
maximum.
cap on that too.
Well,
Frank.
I'll
I
address it.
don't
Yeah,
know what it is, but
and I
there's
see that in here it says 900 single, 1900 for a family.
There's a-
So, and it's in green. I'm assuming that green is supposed to be a benefit, red is a detractor with this chart, so.
Unless someone clicked on the wrong color. But
Yeah, and
that's
I
how
don't know.
interpret it.
It's hard to say, cause like I said, you know, in our current plan, those are fully funded by the township through basic now. So I'm curious where that goes, or if it's part of that upper deductible. And like I said, then just the copay on the scripts, because I know that's gonna be a big question for a lot of people, because that is an increase that's going up. So maybe with some of the money that you're taking, I don't know if there's an intent to, you know, maybe fund some of that for the people. I feel, knock on wood, I'm fortunate, we don't really get into a lot of prescriptions right now, but I know there's quite a few of them out there, and when you start getting up there, and you got 15 or 20 prescriptions and you can't get the generics for them, that's gonna be a big jump for some of those people. So maybe, you know, you might wanna look at something like that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
William Bardell, 18-year resident, new kid on the block. I want to remind you guys, like Mike Gutlow, president of Save Lake St. Clair, said, to go to Save Lake St. Clair, look under the facts, and join up on the Facebook page. I would also like you guys and residents to call Mr. Hackle at 586-469-7001. Again, that's Mark Hackle, our county executive, who's promoting our blue water economy, not brown water. Call him at 586-469-7001, or you can email him at executive@macomb.gov.org. Again, executive@macomb.gov.org. And ask Mr. Hackle why he disassembled the Macomb County Water Quality Board. Now, what does the Macomb County Water Quality Board do? They check the water for parts per million of human poop where they shoot the water into Lake St. Clair at the retention basin level. They check those, and they don't check them during the low water. They check them after the rain, sometimes many times a day. Our buddy, I'd like you guys to call Mr. Hackle and ask him what is the advantage of disassembling the Water Quality Board. Also, I'd like you to call Governor Snyder at 517-737-3400. Call Governor Snyder, the tough nerd, and ask him why it's harder to read our Department of Water Quality discharges in Macomb County this year than it was last year. It was very simple. I can read them, but most people probably can't. And another thing is there's no real-time validation at these retention basins for the proof that this retention water is being treated when we have sewage overflows. And if you don't know what real-time information it means, ask your kid or ask your grandson. It means live, now. Camera seeing the bleach going in, getting mixed, coming out. The device that checks the parts per million of poop goes in, it comes out, and a digital number shoots out. That's live, that's streaming, and there is no validation of that at all. I went on a plant tour of one of the best tightly run waste or retention basins, and this guy was very good. Brent Avery was very good, took me on a tour, and I said, you mean Brent Right now, that retention basin's empty. You empty it out, you treat the water, you shoot it back in. I said, well, but how do you validate this? Oh, well, we'll get in a lot of trouble. I mean, he was a nice guy. He said, well, we'll get in a lot of trouble if we fudge our numbers and this and that. And I'm thinking, wow, you're getting in a lot of trouble. I said, was there any validation? And you go to and you sit on these boards in Oakland County and these other places, how do you validate that that water is actually being treated? Well, we'll get in a lot of trouble. Gee whiz, we'll get in a lot of trouble, and you got 60 beach closures at Metropolitan Beach this year. And we'll get in a lot of trouble. That's all we got in the year 2015 is we'll get in a lot of trouble. No real-time validation that it's been done at all. In 2015, with computers and all this other stuff we got, we're going to Mars, we're finding water on Mars, but we can't validate that the bleach has been bought, it's been mixed, the parts per million mechanism hasn't went in there and pulled out and see the parts per million. There's no validation. So, two things. I need you to call Mr. Hackle and ask him what the advantage is for disassembling the Water Quality Board. And why there's no validation on these wastewater treatment plants. I'm sorry, these retention basins. And ask Mr. Snyder why did he make it more difficult for us to read the water quality information. The Department of Water Quality discharges in Macomb County. I'm telling you, this stuff is going to come and bite us right in the butt. You live on the shore, you drink any kind of water, if you're a living, breathing mammal, you should care about this. And you can talk about what you've done, what you've always done, and this and that. That don't hold salt. Let's get involved in this thing. Put a couple hours a month in it and get involved. Go to lakestclair.org, look under the facts and see what's going on. You're going to hear a bunch of flim-flam. Mr. Hackle's going to send you his best PR guy in the world. He's going to try to smooth talk you. Don't go for it. Real-time validation that this is getting done and the water's being processed correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. There were a few questions regarding the retiree health care, specifically about the education and a timetable. And I can't give a definitive answer to that. I apologize. As I say, I spoke with our Cambridge rep when we met, I believe it was earlier, well, no, it was late September. They said that the next meeting was this meeting, and they said they'd have no problem with the timeline for implementation. As I understood it, they felt that there was a greater educational component or a greater educational task to educate the post-65 retirees because that health care, well, you know, it goes from 2 cards to only 1 card. There's a lot more changes in how they receive their health care. And I think they anticipated less of an issue on the pre-65. They talked about the pre-65, no problem, and they kind of hesitated on the post-65, but said, well, if we can do it in early October, no problem. So I apologize, I don't have that timeline, but I don't anticipate that this is going to be a last-minute thing. There isn't that much for education. And we also talked about the issue relative to snowbirds, whether or not there's information that can be put online. You know, what we learned is this. Not just Cambridge Consulting Group, who basically the salespeople that provide our retiree health care, but in general, post-65 retiree health care coverage is almost exclusive to municipalities. So they've gone through this they listed a dozen other municipalities just in southeastern Michigan where they've gone through and they've had success. So the educational part is one component, But what Rob tells me is, as a general rule, when we make changes, he said, you know, his work representing or providing, I should say, healthcare coverage to our employees and retirees comes in waves. When there's a change, he gets a lot of calls, he gets a lot of questions, and there's a lot of activity. Once, you know, a new contract comes in, there's a lot of questions that people have. So I don't think January 1 is going to be the end of the education component, but certainly before January 1, we'll do that. I don't see a reason why retirees can't be notified of both sessions. I think there's probably some value in maybe making reference to a place on the website so that if there is a mailing, you know, some place where people can go. If there's handouts, we can ask them to make them available, scan them, so that they're available in case someone says, well, I couldn't make it, but I'll go online. And at least if they call to ask questions, we're looking at the same document. So I think that's feasible. The question was, with the HRA plan, you were covered out of state. I know we asked that question specifically, and he said, yeah, there's no problem for coverage out of state. When we talked about the pool of doctors, nothing changes in these plans. It's true that the 1060 on the new plan is a higher copay than any of the plans that were previous, but it's also true that for the first $2,600 of expenses, though there is zero copay, no reimbursement, no anything. So what we talked about is that the potential exists that we'll never be able to have a plan that's identical to another plan, but in a comparison, I think he mapped out 3 different options of winners and losers, meaning that, you know, you may have a greater out-of-pocket expense with this new plan if you're in this bracket. Maybe not specifically an age bracket, but rather maybe you have, you know, maybe you're touching the healthcare industry greater. You may be better off in this plan because once the 2,600 is done, there's nothing out of pocket, there's no reimbursement, there's no anything. You could be in a band where you have practically no health care and you don't even assume $2,600, but there was a band of people that he indicated kind of in the middle that those people may potentially have that impact. And the reality is, short of us saying, okay, everybody come in and tell me how much do you go to the doctor and what do you think your surgery is going to be for the next 5 years, it's not possibly attainable. So, which is why we said until we move into this plan, it's going to be hard for us to say what that winner-loser ratio is. When we talk about equal or better, one of the things we talked about is there may be a retiree that says, hey, you know what? I've ended up paying more out of pocket than I did last year. But we may find that 80% of retirees say, hey, this plan is an improvement to me. So we just don't know those statistics yet. But, you know, certainly we do know that the biggest difference is the prescription copays at 1060 versus numbers that were lower in previous plans with reimbursements in some of those plans. There's also a question about the copay max. There's a number of $950 and $1,900. That copay pertains specifically to prescription drugs. So if you were on a substantial number of, I guess I'll say, you know, non-generic medications that were reimbursed that had a $60 copay, and you had a lot of expenses for retired, maybe say, you know, early January, you blew through the $2,600, the most you're gonna pay in prescription copays is the $950, $1,900. So that's what that component, that copay component is. And again, the likelihood that anybody's gonna experience that exposure is probably extremely remote. But that's what that number refers to. Once the 2,600 is met, that's the only other copay, as it was referenced when we had our workshop. So, are there any other comments? Hearing none, be looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there support?
Support.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Carried, meeting adjourned. Thank you, board.
You didn't say anything.